You don't seem too happy. Their plan is not working. CeCe getting MVP. She can't even hide it anymore. Congrats, I guess. She's mad. You're the reason Caitlin Clark deserves less. Like, this is crazy. This is crazy. Now, outside of this, thrilled about Caitlin Clark winning Player of the Week. And it's raising a lot of eyebrows. A lot of eyebrows. People are questioning, hey, Brianne January, are you mad that Kelsey Mitchell didn't win it? Is something going on? Is this just a bad moment where you just like in the zone, where you spaced out? Because like I've been in the zone and spaced out before. Maybe that I'm trying to shoot you some bail, but I don't even know if I can. The fans are on you. They think that you are hating on Caitlin Clark winning Player of the Week.
Before the season even started, Caitlin Clark looked at this roster and saw the problem nobody wanted to hear about. She wasn't shy about it either. She sat down with Stephanie White and said, we need length, we need depth, we need to do something about this. But the front office told her to trust the culture, trust the system, trust what we've built. And now a single injury has turned that warning into a full-blown indictment of how this entire team was constructed. Welcome to Hoops Pill, where we don't just cover basketball, we expose what's really happening in the league. If you want more hard truth analysis like this, smash that subscribe button, like this video, and stay tuned, because we're about to break down exactly how the Indiana Fever wasted a championship window.
That coach didn't seem too thrilled about this. Take a look.
We got an Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
Caitlin Clark, Player of the Week. Now, that isn't what people are talking about. This is what people are speaking about, right? Posted this, and it looks like there was a lot of people celebratory over the GOAT, Caitlin Clark. Okay, you got the Pacers, you got WNBA in here, you got some fans. Caitlin Clark does it again, okay? Now, this is where things get tricky. Okay, we're gonna see Stephanie White announce Caitlin Clark as the Player of the Week. And there's a coach in particular who we've called out before.
When Damiris Dantas went down, it wasn't just another injury. It was the moment that exposed every structural weakness this organization tried to hide. Indiana came into this season with a massive talent advantage at the guard position. They had Caitlin Clark doing things we've never seen before. They had Kelsey Mitchell, who can score from anywhere. They had Aliyah Boston facilitating from the elbows. On paper, that looked like enough, but deep down, everyone in that locker room knew the truth. This team couldn't survive the way professional basketball actually gets played when the game gets physical, when rebounding matters, when you need another reliable body to spell your star players. The Fever spent all season talking about culture and chemistry and locker room vibes. But you know what culture can't do? It can't grab a rebound. It can't protect the rim. It can't provide a body when your best player gets targeted on defense for the fourth quarter.
Player of the Week, man. Caitlin Clark has been on one. Look, even in a 19, this is how you know the expectations are insane. 19 points, 10 assists. Everybody act like the girl was trash. I mean, it is ridiculous. Anybody else get 19 points and 10 assists in this league, they're celebrated. From Paige Beckers to Olivia Miles to anybody else, they're going to say, hey, that was a great game. Caitlin Clark, she gets trashed for it, but it is what it is. Appears to be an annual Caitlin Clark Weekly Award whenever she actually plays games. This is an annual Caitlin Clark Award. She winning it every week. Every time it's up for grabs, she's taking it. We're going to just call this the Caitlin Clark Award. Caitlin Clark wins Player of the Week once again. 26 points. 54% shooting, 9 assists, 5 rebounds. 25, 9, and 5.
The clearest evidence came when Indiana faced Minnesota. They weren't playing some struggling team trying to tank out the season. They were measuring themselves against a championship-level opponent with actual length, actual depth, actual versatility on the perimeter. And the Lynx absolutely exposed them, not because Indiana's stars weren't talented enough. Clark and Mitchell and Boston showed up. They did their jobs. The problem was everything else. Minnesota dominated the rebounding battle 33-23. They grabbed 11 offensive rebounds, while Indiana could only pull down 5. The Fever didn't generate a single fast break point. That's not a statistical anomaly. That's the fundamental architecture of a team breaking down under pressure. Indiana can score on anyone when the first action works, when the defense breaks down and nobody's open. When the game gets ugly and somebody has to win the war on the boards, that's when this roster becomes a liability, when you need a dependable body who understands professional spacing and doesn't let you get pushed around. That's when the lack of depth becomes a death sentence.
Clark does it again. You know what I'm thinking? We got Kelsey Mitchell fans crashing out. We got a coach that don't seem to be happy. The 11th best guard. How many players of the week does the 10th best guard have? What about the 9th, the 8th, the 7th, the 6th? How many players of the week does the 5th best guard in the league have? What about the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd, or the 1st? I wonder how many they have, because you have a bunch of Kelsey Mitchell fans who are losing their minds because they feel that Kelsey Mitchell should have been awarded Player of the Week, okay? And if you look here, it says, listen, I know it does seem that way, but you have to take in all the criteria of her minutes played, probably sealed the deal. Anywho, I think MVP Mitchell, how can you not? That girl is balling. Okay, so you got people saying Kelsey Mitchell should be winning MVP.
Nobody's arguing that Damiris Dantas was an all-star. She wasn't scoring 20 points a night. She wasn't making all-league teams. What she was doing is something much more valuable in a championship playoff series. She could space the floor from the center position. She could pull defenders away from the paint. She understood the geometry of how an offense actually functions. She was a connector, a veteran who'd been around when Aliyah Boston needed a break. Dantas could slide over and give the team a different look. She wasn't perfect, but she covered several small needs all at the same time. And here's what's crazy about roster construction. When you're deep, losing a player like that is just an inconvenience. You move on to the next option. But when you're thin, when you've already cut corners everywhere else, that single loss forces 2 or 3 other players into roles they were never prepared to handle. Suddenly, your backup center position becomes a complete question mark. Now Natasha Howard is trying to solve every problem by herself. Now you're asking younger players to step up without any real preparation. Now you're running out of options, and you're still facing the exact same Minnesota teams and Vegas teams that punished you when you were full strength.
And then you got people responding. Caitlin Clark, 26, 7, and 9, and 5. Kelsey Mitchell, 30 points, 1 assist, 2 rebounds, or 1 of the 2. There's more to basketball than scoring. Hope this helps. And that is, I do agree with that. You know what I'm saying? Because Caitlin Clark averaging 9 assists, I'm sure if she was like, I just want to average 30, she could sacrifice some assists. She could average 32, 33 if she wanted. She could sacrifice, but then you know what that would mean? We will have 2 guards not passing the ball because we know Kelsey don't pass. You know what I mean? So now we got 2 guards just out there shooting and shooting and shooting. Nobody, if Caitlin ain't passing, nobody's passing.
Here's what really gets me about this situation, though. Everyone in that front office knew about the risk before Dantas even had surgery. She'd been managing a knee issue since before the trade deadline. The organization had access to all the medical evaluations. They knew the rehabilitation wasn't working the way they'd hoped. They knew she was 1 bad possession away from needing an operation. You don't need perfect certainty before you start preparing for a problem like that. A competent front office develops alternatives. It studies available players in the market. It creates contingency plans. It asks what happens if the thing we're hoping for doesn't happen. Indiana instead decided to sit on their hands and hope for the best. They held onto their assets and kept their fingers crossed. But hoping is not a strategy. Hoping is not preparation. Hoping is what happens when an organization believes that culture and chemistry can somehow overcome physical limitations. And now that hope has blown up in their face because basketball eventually exposes every weakness, no matter how much you talk about locker room vibes. The real tragedy here is understanding what this team could have been. Caitlin Clark is producing historic numbers. As a rookie, Kelsey Mitchell has shown up as a legitimate scoring threat. Aliyah Boston is one of the best all-around players in the league. Their offense is capable of challenging anyone. But this is the thing that people don't understand about building championship teams. There's a huge difference between building around a superstar and burdening a superstar. When you build around someone, you use their talent and their gravity to make complementary pieces better. When you burden someone, you expect them to create an entire offense while the team loses possessions through defensive breakdowns and missed box outs, and a rotation so shallow it feels like you're playing 5-on-8, Right now, Indiana is burdening Caitlin Clark. They're asking her to score 25 and pass out of double teams while her teammates are getting exposed on switches. They're asking her to be perfect every night because the margin for error doesn't exist anymore. Championship teams shouldn't need historic guard play just to stay even. They should have enough structural depth that even if one or two things go wrong, they can still compete and still survive the possession where the first action fails. The dangerous part about this isn't that Indiana suddenly became a bad team because they're not. They can still beat strong opponents because their offensive ceiling is genuinely enormous. The dangerous part is that the same weakness that showed up against Minnesota is going to appear at the exact moment when one possession decides a season. Picture a playoff game down the stretch. 2 minutes left. Indiana forces a difficult miss but can't grab the rebound. Minnesota or Vegas gets another chance to score. Aliyah Boston picks up a fifth foul trying to bang with somebody bigger because Dantas isn't there to provide an alternative. Caitlin Clark gets trapped 30 feet from home, and the Fever don't have another reliable shooter or decision-maker because the rotation is already compressed. That's how seasons end, not through some dramatic collapse, but through a collection of small disadvantages that an organization had months to address and chose not to. The front office didn't fail because they couldn't predict exactly when Dantas would need surgery. They failed because they built a team that couldn't absorb a foreseeable problem, and that's a choice, not a circumstance.